Imagine standing next to like an industrial coke oven. It's not just a machine, it's this massive breathing beast of fire.
Yeah, operating nonstop at over 1,000 degrees Celsius.
Right. It's loud, it's intimidating, and it is just absolutely unforgiving. And when a beast like that gets sick, when the internal refractory bricks start failing after 50 years of just constant blistering heat, you don't just put a Band-Aid on it.
No, you really can't.
You have to look into the fire and make some incredibly ruthless choices. So, welcome to the Japan Stock Podcast. I am so thrilled you're joining us today for this deep dive.
It's a really fascinating one today.
It really is. Our mission is to unpack the dramatic survival story and the radically reshaped future outlook of a company that literally had to amputate its own legacy assets just to survive. We're talking about Nippon Coke Engineering.
Right, and if you pull up a standard stock screener right now, you're going to see them classified under petroleum and coal products.
Which sounds a bit dusty, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. But relying on that surface-level summary is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
To truly understand the investment thesis here, we have to look way past that official classification. I mean, we need to dig into the severe balance sheet trauma they've experienced over the last couple of years.
And the pivot, right?
Yeah, the radical surgical strategic pivot they executed in their May 2026 business plan to stay alive.
Because this is a company that literally went into the fire. They suffered a massive operational crisis with their core equipment across 2024 and 2025. But they didn't just fold.
No, they didn't.
They emerged with a modernized survival plan. So to you, the listener, whether you are holding the stock, just watching it, or if you're like us and just fascinated by corporate turnarounds, stick with us, because by the end of this deep dive, you're going to understand exactly how industrial scars can actually be forged into impenetrable financial armor.
I love that framing. And to understand that armor, we first have to really understand the underlying body, right?
Let's lay it out.
So let's look at the blueprint of their revenue. The Coke business is the massive engine here. It traditionally drives about 60 to 70% of their total sales.
Okay, that's the bulk of it.
Yeah. Then you have the fuel and resource recycling segment pulling in another 25 to 30%. And finally, a much smaller but highly profitable, comprehensive engineering segment making up the rest.
Got it.
So analytically speaking, on paper, they are a merchant Coke producer. But their true economic moat, the thing that actually makes them defensible, is that they're essentially an infrastructure and logistics monopoly.
Okay, let's translate that for the listener, because I think that distinction is everything. When you hear a merchant Coke producer, you probably picture like a dirty, isolated coal plant.
Right, a very 19th century image.
Exactly. But think of them less like a coal plant and more like an exclusive VIP transit lounge for massive global commodity ships paired with like a high-tech blender on the side.
That is actually a really accurate way to describe it.
Because they possess this immense private port infrastructure, specifically the Hibiki Coal Center in Kitakyushu. I mean, you can't just buy a plot of land today and easily replicate a private port with massive storage yards.
No, the environmental clearances alone.
Right. Places that can take in colossal bulk carrier ships from around the world, blend the materials precisely, and then ship them back out. That port access is the real monopoly here.
It is. The barrier to entry to build a deepwater industrial port in modern Japan is virtually insurmountable today. But, to understand where that infrastructure is taking them, we really have to trace the chronological causal chain of their 2024 and 2025 crisis.
Because things got really bad.
They did.
Yeah.
Leading up to 2024, Nippon Coke was operating 4 distinct coke oven batteries at their Kitakyushu site. And 2 of these, which were designated as the 1B and 2B batteries, were absolute relics. I mean, they dated all the way back to the 1970s.
And when we say these ovens operate nonstop, we mean literally nonstop.
Right, 24/7.
You cannot easily turn off a coke oven. Like, if you let it cool down, you induce catastrophic thermal shock to the masonry inside, and the bricks simply collapse.
The whole thing just crumbles.
Exactly. So these 1970s ovens had been baking coal into coke continuously for half a century. And in late 2024 and early 2025, that age just finally caught up with them.
Yeah, and the fallout was brutal. I mean, these aging ovens suffered severe operational trouble, and production just plummeted.
And because you can't just flip a switch and walk away, the financial bleed must have been extraordinary.
Oh, it was. Their fixed costs spiked astronomically. They were hemorrhaging cash on emergency repairs, trying to patch up this failing 50-year-old masonry, all while paying elevated power costs just to keep the failing systems hot enough so they wouldn't collapse.
Wow.
Yeah, it culminated in a devastating operating loss for the 2025 fiscal year. It was basically a textbook case of legacy assets morphing into a fatal liability.
Which brings us to the pivotal November 2025 board decision, which was formally detailed in their freshly released May 2026 three-year business plan. Management looked at the bleeding balance sheet, and they made a really ruthless choice.
It really had to.
They decided to permanently shut down those 1970s ovens. And this wasn't just a trim, right? It was an amputation. They reduced their total production capacity from 2 million tons down to just 1.1 million tons.
Yeah, nearly cutting it in half. They consolidated their operations into what they're calling the Sound 2 battery system.
Okay.
In Japanese, it's the Kenzen Nirodan Taisei.
Hmm?
They are now relying exclusively on their 1A battery, which was updated in 2006, and their brand new 2A battery, which just finished a massive update and came online in September 2024.
Okay, wait. Let me stop you there. You just said they slashed their production capacity nearly in half, and if we look at the financials, they cut the dividend to zero to pay for this.
They did, yeah.
So if I'm a retail investor holding this stock right now, I'm panicking. Why are we framing an amputation and a suspended dividend as a victory?
It's a great question, and it sounds bad on the surface. But we have to trace the financial causal chain through the balance sheet and the income statement to see the underlying logic here.
Okay, walk me through the math.
So when they made the decision to permanently shut down those old ovens, accounting rules required them to take an immediate impairment hit of roughly 5 billion yen.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's a massive write-down of asset values. And that specific causal link is what devastated their short-term earnings per share, or EPS, and forced management to cut the dividend to zero just to preserve cash.
Right, survival mode.
Exactly. But taking that pain all at once introduces a structural genius for their future earnings. Because by wiping those dead assets off the balance sheet today, you drastically lower your future depreciation expenses tomorrow.
Ah, okay. Because depreciation is an expense on your income statement that's directly tied to the value of the assets you hold.
Exactly.
So if you take the hit now and write the asset value down to zero, that heavy ongoing depreciation expense just vanishes with it.
Right. And you combine the elimination of that heavy depreciation expense with the total elimination of those constant bleeding emergency repair costs for the 1970s oven.
Right, because they don't exist anymore.
Exactly. The result is a structurally lowered break-even point. It requires significantly less revenue now for this company to just keep the lights on and start generating profit.
Okay, lower costs are great, obviously, but they still have half the product to sell. How do they actually secure revenue with a fraction of their old capacity? I mean, they still have to sell the Coke.
This is where the May 2026 master plan really secures the perimeter. They didn't just cut capacity and hope for the best on the open market. They secured a long-term sales contract with Nippon Steel to absorb the output of this newly slimmed down 1.1 million ton capacity.
Oh, wow. So they fundamentally changed their entire business model.
Yes, they did.
They traded high volume and high volatility for lower volume and total predictability.
Exactly. The gross margins are now highly predictable because the volume is essentially guaranteed to a top-tier client, and the equipment producing it is new, highly efficient, and cheap to run.
That's incredibly smart.
It is. And if we connect this to the holy grail of financial metrics, return on equity, or ROE, the math becomes incredibly potent.
Let's hear it.
So that 5 billion yen impairment hit shrank their overall equity base, right? But with management targeting a 3 billion yen operating profit for the Coke segment by 2027, you have a smaller equity denominator and a rapidly growing profit numerator.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah, the ROE is mathematically primed to rubber band violently upwards.
That rubber band effect is such a great way to visualize it. You pull the equity back with an impairment, and then when the clean profits finally release, the percentage return just snaps forward.
Exactly. It's like financial physics.
It really is. So now that their internal break-in point is lower and they have this Nippon Steel contract, they have some breathing room. But, I mean, they are still a commodity business at heart.
Very true.
Which means they're entirely at the mercy of global pricing. So let's look at the external threats. What are the macro or geopolitical winds that could, knock these two remaining good engines off course?
Well, Nippon Coke's profitability, despite all this incredible internal optimization, is still highly tethered to a specific external pricing variable. The core equation you have to watch here is the spread between Australian coking coal prices and Chinese coke market prices.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that spread for the listener. Why does a Japanese company get squeezed by those two specific countries?
really comes down to where they source their raw materials versus who dictates the regional price of the finished product. So Australia is the primary source of their raw material, coking coal, and they purchase that on FOB, or free on board pricing.
Okay, so that sets their cost floor.
Right. And China, on the other hand, produces so much finished coke domestically that they effectively set the market ceiling price for the entire Asian region just through sheer volume.
Ah, I see. So if Australian mining gets hit by a cyclone or maybe labor strikes, the price of raw coal jumps up. That sets a really high floor for Nippon Coke's costs.
Exactly.
But if China's domestic real estate or infrastructure economy is sluggish, Chinese producers just dump their excess cheap finished coke across Asia.
And Nippon Coke gets completely crushed in the middle.
Man.
Yeah, their margin is literally the physical space between that high Australian floor and that low Chinese ceiling. And looking beyond just regional supply and demand, there are massive macro risks explicitly flagged in their 2026 reports.
Like what?
Specifically, United States trade policy and Middle East tensions. I really need to issue a preemptive warning here regarding the U.S. market and the so-called Trump effect.
Okay.
And to be clear, we are analyzing this purely through the lens of supply chain mechanics. We're completely neutral to the politics themselves.
Right, absolutely. We don't care about the politics, we care about the physics of the global supply chain. So
Yeah.
how does trade policy in Washington physically impact a coke oven or a port in Kitakyushu?
It's a macroeconomic domino effect. Shifting U.S. protectionism, like heavy, sweeping tariffs, disrupts global shipping. Tariffs generally stoke global inflation.
Because goods cost more.
Right. And when U.S. inflation rises, the Federal Reserve adjusts rates, which creates a highly volatile foreign exchange environment. For Japan, that often leads to a weaker yen.
And a weaker yen makes importing that raw Australian coal significantly more expensive for Nippon Coke.
Exactly. And it ripples all the way down to the consumer level, too. If consumer spending globally weakens due to that inflation, like if people aren't buying cars and developers aren't building skyscrapers, global steel demand drops.
And since coke is primarily used as a reducing agent to make steel.
A drop in global steel demand directly threatens Nippon Coke's top line. Furthermore, U.S. high-tech export restrictions on China can indirectly bottleneck Chinese industrial growth.
Which again ripples back to lower steel and coke demand across the entire region.
Exactly.
It really highlights how interconnected this all is. Like, a tariff on a microchip in America can eventually mean fewer bulk carrier ships docking at a port in Japan.
It's all connected.
But if traditional steel and coke demand is surrounded by all these geopolitical landmines, what is their backup plan? Because if you dig into the 2026 reports, there are these incredible hidden growth gems in their other segments that are directly addressing this volatile future.
Yeah, they really have some interesting plays.
Let's look at their fuel and resource segment and how they are handling the global fuel conversion trend.
This is key. As their massive industrial clients try to decarbonize and move away from traditional coal, Nippon Coke isn't just sitting idle losing contracts. They're leveraging that exact same massive private port infrastructure we talked about earlier.
The Hibiki Coal Center, I love this part, they are using this irreplaceable logistics hub to import and handle PKS palm kernel shells and other biomass fuels.
Right.
They're basically telling their clients, you want to go carbon neutral? Fine. We still own the best VIP transit lounge for ships in the region. We'll just bring in biomass instead of coal for you.
It totally proves the core asset isn't the coal itself. The true asset is the physical logistics infrastructure. I mean, handling biomass, like palm kernel shells, on an industrial scale isn't simple.
No, I imagine not.
It's bulky, it requires massive specialized storage yards, deep water port access, and super strict moisture and dust control. By pivoting Hibiki to handle these materials, they are monetizing the logistics, perfectly aligning with Japanese national energy policy.
Because the country is aggressively shifting toward renewable fuel mixtures.
Exactly.
The logistics pivot is brilliant. But I want to bring up the comprehensive engineering segment because it shows a completely different side of the company.
Oh, the powdering tech.
Yes. In the 2026 materials, they mention selling their proprietary powdering and grinding technology. Obviously, there is huge demand for this in high-tech EV battery materials in East Asia and the West, where you need microscopic, perfectly consistent powders for battery cathodes.
Which makes perfect sense for an engineering firm.
Right. But there is this vivid, totally surprising detail alongside the EV tech. Their ultra-fine grinding machinery is seeing a massive surge in global demand for grinding matcha and Japanese tea leaves.
I know it sounds crazy, but the overlap in the physics there is fascinating.
It's so...
The exact same mechanical principles required to pulverize advanced battery metals to a microscopic level are being applied to delicate tea leaves. With the global Japanese food boom, the world desperately needs industrial-scale matcha grinders.
And Nippon Coke's engineering arm is stepping in to supply them.
Yeah.
It's just incredible to think that the same company managing 1,000-degree industrial Coke ovens is also engineering the machines that make the powder for a morning matcha latte in New York or London.
It is a great story. The engineering versatility is definitely a bright spot, and it provides a nice high-margin buffer. But from a pure balance sheet perspective, we have to keep the 80-20 rule in focus here.
Right, don't get distracted by the matcha.
Exactly. While the powdering tech and the biomass logistics represent a great future growth narrative, 80% of this company's immediate profit recovery, the math that is actually going to move the stock and trigger that ROE rubber band effect, is still tethered to that 5 billion yen impairment and the new Nippon Steel contract in the Coke segment.
You always keep us grounded in the actual math, and I appreciate it. So let's bring this all together for the listener. What is the core narrative here? Nippon Coke Engineering isn't just some legacy coal dinosaur waiting to go extinct.
Not at all.
It is a dramatic story of survival through amputation. They suffered a massive operational crisis with half-century-old equipment, and instead of applying a Band-Aid, they shed their dead weight.
Yeah, they made the hard choice.
They took the financial hit, wiped out the depreciation, and built a highly profitable, perfectly streamlined, two-battery core with guaranteed volume. And surrounding that core, they have an impenetrable moat of private port infrastructure transitioning to biomass, alongside a niche engineering arm grinding everything from EV components to matcha.
They traded sheer size for survival and emerged fundamentally stronger. But, to leave you with a macro puzzle to ponder that we haven't touched on yet,
Ooh, what is it?
consider the underlying operational vulnerability of this entire turnaround. They rely on massive physical logistics at these ports. Moving millions of tons of coal or biomass requires a massive human workforce.
Right.
With Japan facing one of the most severe demographic crises and labor shortages in the developed world, the next decade's moat won't just be having the port.
Oh, wow. It'll be about who can actually staff it.
Exactly. Will Nippon Coke be forced to fundamentally reinvent their operations again? I mean, could their ultimate form over the next 10 years be a fully automated, AI-driven, autonomous logistics hub just to overcome the lack of human operators?
Will they have to amputate human labor next, purely out of demographic necessity? That is a fascinating question and something for all of you to mull over as you look at the long-term viability of heavy industry in your own portfolios.
Definitely something to watch.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking these corporate survival stories with you on the Japan Stock Podcast. Until next time, keep digging into the data.